This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you.
Welcome to another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Matt is in a completely better mood than me as we talk about the NBA Finals on today's episode. So, Matt, without further ado, what are your thoughts on this NBA Finals matchup between the Warriors and the Celtics before giving away your prediction?
Before giving away my prediction, well, I'm sure we're going to get into specifics as we go further into the show, but the first thing that immediately comes to mind for me is, you know who's really happy right now? Adam Silver and every NBA owner, because this is kind of like a dream matchup for you after the past couple years of the pandemic and the bad publicity that's come from that. And last year's finals featuring some teams that were beloved by hoop heads, but not really in the public eye. Hoop heads love Giannis. They love Chris Paul. They're not really in the public eye, the public zeitgeist. And now this year, you've got two of the franchises who you're going to have a battle of the coast. You're going to have a battle of the explosive offense. You've got one of the biggest marketable names. It's Stephen Curry back with a redemption arc like a wrestler at WrestleMania. You've got Jason Tatum in Boston. And even if you can't name a single Boston Celtic, you know what the Boston Celtics logo is. You know what their colors are. You know who they are. And you know what that means, Les? Money, money, money. From advertisers, from people tuning in. You've got two of the bigger markets in the NBA and two of the bigger fan bases, especially with the youth gravitating toward the last Warriors dynasty. And, all things considered, it's a great matchup even for people who love basketball, because this is just going to be a fun group of games. Two teams who are really playing at the best they've been all year, and I do mean that. In a time where it seems like a lot of teams were banged up, injured, or incomplete, these two teams seem like they're healthier now than they've ever been, and they're ready to go forward. And I know it had to come at the expense of your beloved Heat. So, Les, I'm going to turn it over to you and get some thoughts from you about how you felt last night, how you feel going forward, and what your big thoughts are going in, not just from the perspective of the two teams we got in the finals, but of your beloved Miami Heat. What do you have to say, Les?
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get my thoughts of the Miami Heat out of the way. So
this is your venting time. Just let it all out, buddy.
This is my rant. This is my rant portion of the podcast. All right, so it was a great season. We had the best record in the East. And in my opinion, we were the most disrespected number one seed in NBA history. And the reason I say that, the reason I say that, we're already a top seed. They led the NBA in three-point shooting. They were a top two defensive team, one of the deepest teams in the league, and they used it with all the injuries they had. Between us and Chicago, we had the most starting lineups in the NBA this season. And all of that, and I'm calling out all of you experts, all you social media hoop heads, not one, okay, I can't say that. The only one, other than outside of this podcast, that I heard give us a shot at all was JJ Redick, who has been also known as a Heat homer on his Old Man in the Three podcast. But you have a team that is so successful in so many important ways, but yet almost nobody is convinced on them. And I think if it's any more, let me rephrase that. And if it's not disrespectful enough to count us out, Matt, how long are we going to count out Jimmy Butler? Yes, you knew it was coming. You absolutely knew it was coming.
I did.
First, I'm gonna ask a series of questions, Matt, and I just need a yes or a no. Is Jimmy Butler a perennial all-star?
Yes.
Does he play both sides of the ball very well?
I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna give you that yes.
Has he made every team that he's ever played on better?
Minnesota would disagree with you, but I'm going to say yes.
Well, Minnesota was a 4 seed when he played, and they were in danger of missing the playoffs when he didn't. But yes, I understand the joke there. More like D'Lo and Karl Anthony Towns would disagree with that statement. But Andrew Wiggins said he was a very good teammate. Now, here's the kicker. Here is the number one. Does he play his best basketball in the postseason?
That is a bona fide certified yes-a-Rooney right there.
What else I got to say? What else I got to say? The man is an absolute star. And anybody who watched this postseason who wants to disagree with that, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, this man left it all on the line, gave it everything he had, and they were within 5 points of making another NBA Finals, which would have been their second in the last 3 years. So please give Jimmy Butler his roses, give the Miami Heat the respect that they deserve. Most hoop heads respect Spo as a coach. They didn't really until LeBron left town, and we saw how competitive they were even since then. But come on, guys. As a Heat fan, I get it. I'm a Heat homer. You know you're gonna hear me talk about them. But please, I would like to see more hoop heads jump on the Heat bandwagon because they are for real. They are legit. And all depending on what goes on in the offseason, they could very well be right back in this position next year.
Right. Unless I'm going to interject with 2 quick points here.
Absolutely.
I was one of those guys at first who wasn't sold on Eric Spoelstra in the least. I mean, when you have 3 perennial Hall of Famers on your roster, it's kind of hard to tell how good of a coach you are. But I mean, ever since then, I've been waiting for like Miami to fall off the face of the planet, and they haven't done it yet. They're just too well constructed to completely flame out and fail. And secondly, and this is also to your credit, I think you hit the nail on the head there because every time I would look at the series summary for like the games, it's like Kyle Lowry's not playing, Tyler Hero's not playing, Duncan Robinson didn't play, and they're still dragging a very good Boston team who, let's not forget, also beat the defending champions to 7 games, and they're still even in Game 7, even though every other game in that series seemed like a 20-point blowout. But so let's not forget that the Miami Heat did this with Max Struss and Sam Vincent, 2 guys who
Gabe Vincent,
Sam Vincent, and one of the Martin brothers. And
Caleb,
so I mean, Caleb, I always get them mixed up. So I mean, it's
they're twins. I understand.
You just got to wonder, even if you're trying to hate, just how good this team could be at full capacity, full strength. We know they're 1 seed capable, but when the only 2 guys you've got healthy who are all-star caliber at any given moment are Bam and Jimmy Butler, there's only so much you can do. I mean, I like the way Miami plays. I like their depth. I mean, when Jason Tatum's going off, and you don't have your top-tier guys or Jaylen Brown, and you just don't have your top-tier guys, it's just going to be a long night. And I think people really do need to put some respect on the fact that this series went 7 games to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Because Miami could have just taken up the ball and go home with Lowry and Hero and whoever else got hurt that night got hurt, but they didn't. And they battled back. They used media comments for fuel, especially Draymond Green's. And they came within 5 points of the finals and won Jimmy Butler 3, which don't complain about that. Who else was scoring last night? No one. So don't tell me he's not clutch when he's the only guy doing anything and he's literally carrying the team so much. It's like he's got a boulder. The entire Mount Everest is on his back. So give him a little bit of slack and just admit the fact that maybe Miami is good. Because a lot of that is just resentment from the LeBron years, I feel like. It's just a lot of resentment.
I'm gonna make this short and sweet just so we can transition to the teams that are actually in the NBA Finals. But like Mark Jackson said perfectly last night, you live and die with your best player taking the final shot. That's something we've often criticized, that the same hoop heads that will criticize Jimmy Butler for that shot he took will criticize LeBron for kicking it out to a wide open shooter. And that's pretty much. And also, as much as we talk about how well the Miami Heat play, I just got one thing to say: #Heat culture, baby. But
oh no.
Now let's finally get into the teams that are actually in the NBA Finals, and we'll start with the Golden State Warriors because I think there's a lot of storylines heading in with them. So this is their 6th Finals appearance in the last 8 season, adding to their dynasty. And so my question for you, Matt, is this the most impressive run?
The easy thing to say is yes, of course, and I think it is true. I think this is the most impressive run they've had. Even when they were young and like it was the first time they did it, it just felt different. It just felt different because they were young, they were healthy, they were like a great story. It was a feel good story everyone could get behind in a way, but also it could be like, oh, they're the new young guns we're gonna love to hate. And then of course the lean years happened. Curry's hurt, Thompson's hurt, Kevin Durant goes in free agency and he's also hurt. And now you've got a team that's rebuilt itself during a dynasty run. It's so weird to think about because now you got guys like Kuminga, you've got guys like Tim Wiseman, you've got guys like Moses Moody, and you've got so many guys now who are young and very talented and very good that were high draft picks from a few lean years you had while your best players were injured. And now it feels like, the champ is back, but they're not hateable. They're not hateable. This is the most impressive run because we've seen how much the league has changed since they last got there. Giannis really wasn't a thing the last time they got there. LeBron was still the greatest player. Luka Doncic wasn't a thing. Jokic wasn't a thing. Embiid was getting there. There's a new crop of superstars that they had to go through to get here, and they did it just like they did in the olden days, and they did it with a whole new core of guys. They did it drafting guys like Jordan Poole. They did it homegrown again, which is really weird. Like I said, they rebuilt during a dynasty. There aren't many people who can do that. And that being said, while this is their greatest title run, in my opinion, there is certainly, beyond a doubt, more pressure on Golden State than there is on Boston right now. And the reason I say that is because if Golden State pulls this off, we're entering some rarefied air here, Les, because that's 4 titles for most of these guys. 4 titles is a pretty steep company, and this could really affect where Steph Curry ends up all time, where everybody ends up all time. This is going to be really interesting to see because while the Warriors have been here before, the pressure to just not only you're already in the pantheon, now you're trying to get on the Council of Gods if you win that 4th title. And I mean, with the way he's changed the game, there's got to be pressure on Steph Curry and Golden State that there isn't on Boston simply because they're playing with some pretty high stakes here.
That actually brings me into my next question. With a potential NBA Finals win, where does Steph Curry rank in the all-time point guard list, or even all-time player list?
Listen, I'm going to go first here, and I mean, I don't know how you're going to react to this, but he's got to be top 10. When you look at the way he's changed the game, 4 titles. Let's assume he wins a Finals MVP here. He's got 4 titles, a Finals MVP, a unanimous MVP, another MVP to go with that, and just on sheer principle, the way he's turned everybody, and I mean everybody, from, like shooting threes is okay, you have a 3-point specialist too. Everyone's got to make threes, and they got to make them from halfway across the gym. They got to make them from across the state line. I mean, that's transformative to the game of basketball. And the Warriors as a whole, the way they've transformed from like rigid positioning to positionless basketball, where Draymond Green is a center. If they win this 4th title, I don't think there's much of an argument where you could say he's not top 10 all time. I'm sorry, Bob Cousy, but you're just going to get kicked out. I'm sorry. It's a new era, and you got to respect when a guy defines that new era. And this is a chance that Curry has to further define his legacy in this new era.
I'm going to take a step further. I agree he'll be top 10, but I'm going to take it a step farther and say that he's going to be the best point guard. He should be ranked the number 1 point guard of all time, which I know is going to surprise a lot of people. And I've said for years, and it's going to be so weird for me to say that, to put anyone above Magic Johnson. But for everything you just said, as far as how he's changed the game, I mean, this dude eliminated the back to the basket big man, for Christ's sake. Now everyone wants to shoot threes, which was something that we either had just guys hang out on the perimeter, just hit spot up threes, and we're just specialists. He's made it a norm that your star player has to shoot the 3-point shot at a consistent clip. And he's changed the narrative of that jump shooting teams can't win titles. And that's why, I'll piggyback onto the first question and then come back to this one. Because my first one, I still have to say that their first title run was the most impressive, simply for the fact that they changed the narrative about jump shooting teams. Not to mention, they had to knock off a guy who had just he was at his 5th consecutive NBA Finals appearance in LeBron James, who, in my opinion, is the greatest basketball player that's ever lived. And they had to go through him to get that first title, and did it pretty convincingly. Look, I get it. Kevin Love, Kyrie weren't hurt, but that's still LeBron James they're talking about, and that's never an easy feat. So that first title run for me was still the most impressive. So now piggybacking into the next point is that I look at how much he's just changed the game, and not to mention not only how he's changed the game, of how he's kept LeBron from dominating even more, which is crazy to think about, because as much as that spiel I just went on about him being the greatest player ever, if it weren't for Steph Curry, there'd be no debate about it. It would be LeBron, no question. And the fact that And the fact that this small point guard from Davidson has kept LeBron from being the unanimous GOAT is a feat in its own right. And you have to acknowledge that as a hoop head, as a whoever. So I think Steph goes on to be the best with a finals win. He goes on to be the best point guard ever. He's top 10. But I still believe that their first title run was the most impressive just because of how much they changed the narrative of what it took for teams to win championships. And I guess, do you have anything you want to add to that, Matt?
No, the only thing I can think of is I think going back to my thing that there's pressure on. The only thing that is a blemish on the Curry legacy and the Warriors legacy is, of course, and this will be tweeted to the heavens if they lose, and any point during this finals will be 73-9 and they lied. You know what that means? I know what that means, and that's just going to get amplified by a billion if they struggle or if they lose this series.
All right, so my next question is, as for the team that was eliminated from the playoffs with the Warriors reaching the finals, the Dallas Mavericks, where do they go from here?
Oh, that's a great question because it's hard to really tell because, like we said, this is another testament to the way Golden State has changed the game, which is that you've got to have shooters, but you still need to have something down low. And right now, Dallas doesn't have much of either. They've got their Steph Curry. They've got Doncic. They've got him. But you can't have guys like Reggie Bullock going, I don't remember the exact number, but 0 for 13 from 3. And you also got to have a better presence down low to try and contain smaller dudes like Draymond Green. So I don't know what the aggressive strategy becomes from this point. But if I'm them, you got to get slightly better shooters. Jalen Brunson's fine. But I would even look to upgrade from Jalen Brunson because you've got to have – I know we're talking about two teams who are actually homegrown being in the NBA Finals. But this is one of those times where you got to look and say, what are the pieces we need in terms of shooting and in terms of defensive guys who can corral people like Draymond Green down low, who can shoot from the outside, who can complement our Steph Curry, who's Luka Doncic. So, I mean, I, for one, was shocked Dallas made it that far to begin with. I know that they have one of the best players in the league right now, and I know he's a perennial MVP candidate, though he hasn't won one yet. But to see them just beat several teams that they shouldn't really have beaten and advance was kind of shocking. I mean, when they beat Phoenix, I couldn't put my finger on it. It was kind of like there's no way that they should be this much better than Phoenix, especially since they're really a one-guy team, whereas Phoenix, you've got Paul, Booker, and now disgruntled DeAndre Ayton down low, and they just made them look like it was the Washington Generals and the Harlem Globetrotters out there in that Game 7. So while this Mavericks roster was good enough to do that Warriors series, you could tell that they were just totally outmanned, outgunned, and out-firepowered. There was no way that they were going to win that series, and it's just weird thinking about what's good for one team can end up being terrible for the other. People thought that the Mavericks were a better matchup for Golden State, and it just didn't materialize. So I don't exactly know what you do other than get more consistent shooting and a big man that's not our beloved Boban. You've got to get slightly more athletic, I suppose is the word I'm looking for, and just get guys who complement the way Doncic wants to play, because it's clear that this roster is good, but it just needs to be tweaked in ways that match up with the modern NBA.
My answer is a lot simpler than that. Just get Luka some damn help. As much as we compare Luka and LeBron's careers together when they were around the same time frame when they were first entering the league, this reminded me of when LeBron led the Cavaliers to the Eastern Conference Finals, and his next two best players were Mo Williams and Delonte West. I mean, I get those similar vibes with Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie. So my answer is Luka is an absolute star. He is an all-time great in the making and a perennial MVP candidate, as you just said. He's been statistically shown to make every Mavericks team better, and when he's on the floor, the Mavericks are analytically a top 10 offense of all time. So with that being said, there's plenty of free agents this year that they could get. I'm hearing a lot of buzz that Zach LaVine could go to the Mavericks, which if I'm just imagining how much of a show that's going to be if LaVine were to team up with Luka Doncic. But I mean, there's other guys. There's Brad Beal. There's James Harden, Kyrie Irving. Not saying any of these guys will go there or any of them will mix with Luka, but there's just a lot of big names there. At the end of the day, just give Luka some damn help is all I have to say.
That's a very simple way of putting it because he definitely needs it.
All right, now let's transition to Boston. And, one of the first things that stands out to me is how preseason, I heard a lot of Celtic fans, a lot of NBA media, they almost thought that Boston could very well miss the playoffs. Now here they are in the NBA Finals. And among that conversation is I always kept hearing about how the Celtics may want to transition away from Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. But here they are in the NBA Finals yet again. So, Matt, my first question to you is, are you there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, you're there. My first question to you there is, what was wrong in the past that the Celtics fixed this season?
I think the real thing they did is they stepped up that defensive intensity. And I think when they did that, ironically enough, they found their identity because I was one of those guys who might have said that Boston was probably going to be in the play-in because other teams looked really good. But I'm not really saying I said that. It's not like there's any video of it, as far as I know. But I think that's really what changed the season, turned it around a little bit. They got really good with defense. They got really focused on playing. They bought into their coach, too, I think is a little bit of it. Because Brad Stevens is in the front office now. It takes a while if you're a coach, especially in like the NBA, to get guys to buy into your regime. And the way they played defense starting in January was just absolutely incredible, the way they did things. And granted, we've talked about Bam Adebayo as Defensive Player of the Year. It was going to be a guy from the Boston Celtics because they went back to the drawing board and they realized, I think, that if this didn't work, it was going to get blown up. We've been saying for years that the Celtics arrival party is due any minute now, and they're out of the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, which is traditionally the weaker conference, even though now it's a little bit more even. And it looked like, we were saying around the trade deadline that it was time to move on from Jaylen Brown or time to move on from Marcus Smart. And I think these guys finally bought into the fact that they could be good defensively as their coach and the front office said they could be. And they realized that if they didn't, it was going to mean a rebuild. And instead of rebuilding, now we're talking about how a good young Boston team may threaten to go to several NBA Finals playing this level of defense with the Defensive Player of the Year. And it's amazing to see that. And I think we've also seen he was already there, but now he's just solidifying in a way akin to what Jimmy Butler did in Miami during the bubble, is that we're seeing the birth of a new superstar in Jason Tatum. We're seeing him take that next step. We're seeing him take the crown and enter the club of the elite. I mean, he was great before, but now we're mentioning him in breaths with like MVP candidates. We're talking about how next season he's already up on that ladder. And I think his emergence as a superstar and the willingness of the other members of that team, whether it be Robert Williams, Al Horford, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, to play off of that, has really changed it. They've found their roles, and Jason Tatum has found his as the transcendent future MVP candidate superstar that Boston needs to win. And it's like what he said after they won last night when he hugs Jaylen Brown and says, and they wanted to separate us. These guys know they have a brotherhood. They have a defensive-minded brotherhood with one guy in the middle who has the ability to take over a game and really become a perennial MVP. And I think that's what we saw. We saw the perfect storm of people finding their roles and buying into their coach and just believing that they could do it. And desperation, even a little bit. So that's what it is for Boston for me. A little bit of desperation and a little bit of acceptance for the Boston Celtics has brought them this far.
I've never agreed with that narrative that they should split Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown up. I always thought that was just an idiotic take and should never be mentioned. I always thought the issue was the complementary pieces they had around them. The Kyrie Irvings, the Kemba Walkers. They were never a good fit. Anytime you have a star-studded wing duo like that, you really don't need that flashy point guard. You just need a guy that can come in there and get the job done. And I think, and a lot of people thought I was crazy for this, but that's why I like the Derek White trade. I thought Derek White is not a big name, but he fits what they want to do. And as you said,
Right.
And as you said, Jason Tatum has really taken that next step to become a star. Well, as you all know, I'm also a Duke fan. I saw this from a very young age, so this does not surprise me at all. But now I think eventually they just found the right pieces to put around their duo. And of course, another one is bringing back Al Horford. Al Horford just as a locker room presence, as an in the middle presence, just everything about Al Horford is just a symbol of what the Celtics are about. And he's fed off, and they have fed off that energy, and now look where they're at. And also another one is I can't say enough about the series that Robert Williams had. This guy's become an absolute defensive force. And as much as I hate to admit it, he absolutely sunned Bam Adebayo most of the series. So, but again, I always thought it was the complementary pieces that need to be adjusted. And as you said, they bought into their new head coach, and now it's paying dividends. And I hate that it's at the expense of my Heat, but we knew it was coming eventually. So
Yeah,
I think the Celtics are here to stay. Jason Tatum is a great player, and of course, I absolutely love the tribute he had to Kobe last night. I just wish it did not come at my Heat's expense.
and the thing too about Boston, Les, especially this year with this title run, is that they've already been battle tested by they had 2 Game 7s against Giannis and Jimmy Butler, and that's a big confidence booster. But even their sweep was against Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Let's not forget that. I know the Nets weren't a great team by any stretch of the imagination, but when you go against 2 top 20 guys on the same roster, you're playing with fire in a lot of ways because you never know if one of them's going to get hot. So they sweep them. They play the defending champions, and even though they didn't have Chris Middleton, Milwaukee is still a deep team with a guy with 2 MVPs. And then they play a team, like you said, that's been to the NBA Finals in the past 3 years, who's very deep. And even though they're banged up, they find a way to beat them in 7 games. So that's got to be a huge confidence booster because you're battle tested. Now, of course, the flip side of that is you're also exhausted emotionally and physically from giving it your all in 2 series against 2 very deep teams with unique superstars with defensive qualities. So the question now shifts to who benefits more. Will it be the Warriors with their many days of rest and fairly easy series wins, or will it be Boston getting very physical, very tough, and finding some confidence in 2 very tough Game 7s and 2 very tough series? That's not a question I'm asking. Statement.
I'll say one thing I think that also isn't getting talked about is the job. As we talk about how good of a job Ime Udoka did this season, he's on the verge of potentially joining some very elite company as in a first-year head coach to win a title. We look at Steve Kerr did it his first year with the Warriors. Nick Nurse did his first year with the Raptors. And I'm sure there's other examples that I just can't think of right now. But, I mean, how impressive of a job that would be for him to come in year 1 and win a title. And do you think that would say more of the job he did specifically? Or do you think that just for controversial reasons, could that be attributed to what maybe Brad Stevens wasn't doing?
No, that's a good question because I really don't know. I wouldn't say that it's Brad Stevens because if he's the coach, who's to say that they're not in the same position? There's really not that much different, but the defensive intensity is turned up. I do admit that defensive intensity has been turned up to 11 now. And that's something that Brad Stevens tried to do, but it just didn't work out. The other thing that it tells me, Les, and this is more of a humorous thing, is that I think the Nets should get a little bit of this title that Boston's in contention for because Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, picks they got from the Nets. Their new coach, picks they got from guy from the Nets. Nets, baby. Well, I don't exactly know what's happened there, but the fallout from the Kevin Garnett Paul Pierce trade is still felt to this day, some 8 odd years later, and it's led two teams in two very different directions. But that's just my aside from that question. But to just be frank, I don't think it's anything Brad Stevens wasn't doing. I think it has to do more with a coach who's building connections a little bit better with his guys.
All right, so as we enter the final 10 minutes of the podcast episode, I just got one question left, Matt. Who wins and why? Go.
I'm actually going to take Golden State in 6. I think it's going to be a great series. I don't think we're going to get 20-point games in between like we did in the conference finals. I think it's going to be a very close series, but I think that the Warriors have been here before. They've got a little bit, like I said, they're playing with house money. They're playing to cement their legacy, to get a guy into the top 10 all time. And I just love their depth pieces as much as I love Boston's. And I think that maturity that they have and the fact they've been here before will guide them to a very hard-fought title. And now I'm going to make an even weirder prediction here. I think the Finals MVP is actually going to be Jordan Poole. I think he's going to be the Finals MVP. I think we're focused on Steph Curry and Clay and Draymond, but I think out of nowhere that Jordan Poole can get some big, meaningful baskets because he's long and he could have been an All-Star this year, and I think he's going to be the Finals MVP just because he is like the third Splash Brother now, and it's going to be interesting to see how Boston game preps for that.
I'm so glad that you picked the Warriors because it makes us not look like we're going to agree with each other. I am actually going to go with the Boston Celtics in 6. And the reason I say that is just they've have all the momentum in their direction. They've been the best team in the league since January or post All-Star break, whichever time frame you want to consider. And I like the way they defend. I think they can switch out on any shooter Golden State has to offer, whether that be the greatest shooter of all time, arguably the second greatest shooter of all time, or Jordan Poole. I think with Marcus Smart, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Tatum, they have Robert Williams. They have somebody for everybody defensively. And ultimately, Jason Tatum has taken that next step as a superstar in the league. Not to mention he's got the perfect complementary piece in Jaylen Brown. And I got to roll with the Celtics. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, you got to roll with the Celtics because they knocked your heat out. Maybe a little bit. But no, I thought, ironically enough, as we talk about how the West has been the last several years, the more competitive conference, I actually thought after the Warriors clinched their berth, that whoever came out of the East was going to win the title because I thought both Miami and Boston match up with Golden State very well. So since Miami has come out of the East, I got to roll with the Celtics.
The one thing I am confident is that this is just going to be a really good series because, like you said, Boston seemingly has a defensive guy for every position. They're deep. The Warriors are very deep. You kind of got a yin and yang thing going with the amount of shooters on Golden State and the defensive stalwarts on Boston. It's going to be a really intriguing series to see who comes out on top because there are guys we haven't even talked about, like Admiral Schofield, who has played. No, is that right? Grant Williams, not Admiral Schofield.
Both went to Tennessee. Both went to Tennessee.
Basketball. He's played like an exceptionally well during this playoff run.
I don't even think Schofield's been in the playoffs. I don't think.
Was he on Boston though? He might have been on the Celtics once.
He may have been on their maybe their summer league affiliate or something, or their G League affiliate. But
I was just thinking, guy from Tennessee plays good defense. Oh, and they just so happens to be on the same team. But no, Grant Williams has been really interesting to watch. Like I said, we still got Robert Williams down there. It's just going to be a really fun series because these are two very deep teams, and I don't think we're going to get those 20-point games we've had to suffer through every other night. I think this is going to be a competitive series, and regardless of who comes out on top, everyone's going to be asking the same question, and that's one thing less, and I want to hear your take because here we go. How does this affect LeBron's legacy?
I think LeBron's legacy is pretty much set in stone. I didn't bite on it. I knew where you're going with it, but no.
Oh man, I was hoping I could get you.
No, does not affect his legacy at all. I think his legacy is pretty set in stone. And regardless of what anyone says, to me, he is the greatest player that has ever lived. But that's just my opinion. Obviously, people are subject to others. But without further ado, that is all the time we have for today. As always, like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports YouTube channel. Comment in this comment section below what you like, what you didn't like. Do you agree with Matt? Do you agree with me? Or do you agree with neither one of us? And tell us that we're both wrong. That is welcome as well.
Tell us we're idiots. We love to hear it.
We love it, actually. We embrace it. You know what?
We live for the
Much
abuse.
much like my heat with Draymond Green, we actually encourage that because that makes us perform better.
Bulletin board material. I've got one right over here, people. We're ready to go.
Ready to go in the bedroom of nerds. But until next time, Matt and I are out.
See y'all.